Well, can you guess the headlines of the newspapers this morning? A lot of hand-wringing. A dark day for Europe as Putin invades, almost as if, oh, goodness gracious me, we didn't really believe that it was going to happen. Well, that's the nonsense of our leadership, and it's a nonsense at the moment of some, I say some, of our national press. Hand-wringing. Oh, dearie, dearie me, as if they really honestly couldn't believe it could happen. And yet, those of us who had been in that part of the world, Lugansk, Donetsk, for that matter, the satellites, Lithuania, Latvia, and for that matter, the South Caucasus, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, that fear was always there. And we discounted it, and we pranced around, and we behaved like absolute idiots in our approach to what are very serious matters on the world stage. However, do not hang your head in total shame, because most of our allies did the same. France, Germany, the EU totally, the United States took absolutely no notice of the signs, and in the meantime, all you needed was an evil warlord to creep up, and whoosh, it happens, and we have no idea what to do about it. We have no idea whatsoever. Just before we go to the papers, colleague and I on the United States, Mark Landsman, posted on YouTube and said, one thing that nobody has bothered to raise yet, and perhaps we should all now start to look at it, is if Putin can get away with this, so can Xi, and so can the Chinese, so can they start a similar expansionist policy, which they've wanted to do for quite some time in Southeast Asia. Are we seeing actually the end of social stability as we know it? Because we've ignored the warlords. They cannot do it. War is peace. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, now we are reaping the wind. We are reaping the folly of our own inaction. We are reaping the folly of our abuse of our own democratic system. The Guardian, Putin invades. The Times, a dark day for Europe. Both of them showing pictures of an injured lady, citizen, with absolute havoc behind her, caused supposedly by the missiles that Russia has launched against Kiev. The Mirror, her blood, his hands. Yes, we are pointing the finger at Putin. Yes, indeed we are. But we have got a lot to answer for ourselves. And our society has really ignored what we should have been doing. The Sun, her blood on his hands, the same thing. The Daily Mail, Putin to seize capital in days. Well, it may be hours. There is some suggestion that the fighting is going on now for the airfield, the airport just outside Kiev, one that I've flown into several times, and that once that is captured by the Russians, which it undoubtedly will be, then they've got their launch pad to take the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. So that could be literally hours, not just days. The Daily Telegraph, a new Cold War as Putin strikes. Well, it may be a new Cold War, but I'm not sure that our response of sanctions is quite enough. Once a dedicated militant gets a grip on a strategy that has caught everybody on the hop, then it's difficult to stop it. It was in 1939, it was in 1914, or thereabouts. The Financial Times, Putin's forces storm Ukraine. Headlines right throughout. The Eye, Ukraine's agony. Daily Express, redrawing map of Europe in blood. The Metro, the London paper, war in Europe. The Star, who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Putin? With a redrawn picture of him with a Hitler moustache and forelock. Who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Putin? Well, it's all very well, Star, one of my favourite papers normally, because it is so irreverent. But the fact of the matter is we are culpable. We have been asleep at the switch. We have been creating a society which has got itself so much up its own bum with silly things like wokes and the leadership of the House of Commons under fire because of iced cakes. Is we are actually reaping what we deserve. The signs have been there for a long time. It's 5 years since I worked in Lugansk on the eastern border of Ukraine with Russia. And then there was a great leaning towards the Russian Federation because of the way that the EU had mishandled its support of the local populace, which it had gaily put out of work because of an unquestioned open market philosophy. Yes, I'm an open marketeer. I don't believe that central planning can work anywhere in the world. But nonetheless, if you're going to switch from one system to another, you've got to make sure that you do it in an ordered and sensible way, and not just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Anyway, the other plaintive thing is from some of the rural people who are suddenly seeing Russian troops march into their towns and their countries and their farms, is saying, where is the West? Where are our supposed allies? Why are we left alone? It's a plaintive cry that has been echoed down the centuries, and one did not think that you would hear it in a modern world. But there it is. And what have we been doing? Trying to rewrite the English dictionary. For God's sake, when are we going to wake up to the nonsense that we've been propagating? Yes, there is a lot wrong with this world. There's a lot wrong with our society. But we have an unerring instinct for taking the trivial and ignoring the important and the factual and the serious problems around the country. Why do we do it? Well, because we get fat and sassy, and because we talk each other into it can't happen. With all due respect, is our schools, while they are turning out some very bright youngsters in a certain sector, in others are not turning out any sort of youngster at all. They are abandoning a whole sector, a whole segment of people, and really saying, go out there and do your best, and we'll pat you on the shoulder. And they go out and they have to sleep in the streets. They have to meet bureaucracy when it comes to homelessness. And increasingly, as mental health and mental stress increases, and I think that we're all subject to that at the moment, or most of us are subject at one level or another, is totally ignoring it, except to say, oh dear, it's here. We've got to do something about it. But then, like this situation in Ukraine, not doing anything at all, and then wondering why we're in such a muck, in such a mess. It's all about real leadership. We have for years been honing our system so that only the chosen can be appointed leader, and most of them don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, we talk about freedom. Jeremy Hunt, whom some people say is not the most pleasant of men, I don't know. I've been in the same room with him, but I've not talked to him face to face. But he made a real stab at trying hard to set up a network of television stations similar to this. And then when he moved on from that ministry, of the Ministry of Media, Culture, and something else, art, I think, I mustn't ignore that, a very important element of our society. But he moved on, and his civil servants got hold of it, and by the time they'd finished, all they did was they replicated what they had before, and which had been closed down because it didn't work. Now, we get what we ask for, and anybody with any sort of vision, and I like to think that in this particular field I've got vision, and I get no support from anyone, certainly not from any local council. Local politicians, I can count on the fingers of one hand how many have really realised the necessity of a free voice, a voice that perhaps they don't like to hear, but is needed to make sure that they stay on the narrow path of success, instead of farting around the way they do with so many things. The only thing that works in our local council is the collection department, and then they have to rely upon breaking what would be breaking the law for us, using excuses in the Data Protection Act to get at our private banking accounts and into our private lives. It is a sad situation, but because the economy has been good, because we've been getting plenty of money into our coffers, because we've been able to get just about anything that we want to make us comfortable. And the argument is should you have 2 cars or 3 cars? Or should you have an SVU or whatever it's called? Or you should have one of those plus a Mini. Those sort of issues maybe need debating, but they do not need to be at the top of the agenda, and they have been. And all the while, all the signs were there that this militarist, Putin, was busy building a platform with which to invade. Now, we either had people in that part, representing us in that part of Ukraine, who didn't know what they were looking at, or weren't listening, or were sending in lovely reports because that's what they were expected, or were simply so underwhelmed with their own forms and so on that they really could not see the main issue, and that is that there was a very dissatisfied population with what the EU had done. And at that time we were part of the EU, and nobody bothered to pick up the signals. I picked them up, but then nobody has bothered to ask me, despite the fact that I've got a huge background in most of the countries that are under threat right now. Huge background. I've lived there, I've worked there, I've talked, I've been involved in trying hard to evolve legislation, mostly media and freedom, yes, but nonetheless, anti-corruption. In Romania, now Romania is beginning to shiver. It could be a target. If Russian expansionism really takes off, it couldn't, could it? No, of course it couldn't. Oh, well, the invasion of Ukraine couldn't take off either. We have ignored, and our leaders have ignored, and what do? They pick people to lead the key elements of our society who are hanging around in the civil service. They do not go and look for the best people. BBC is a case in point. No wonder it's become such a shadow of itself. It doesn't look for broadcasters. It doesn't look at any level. The level of talent, generally speaking, with exceptions, of course. I generalize a little bit, but with exceptions. But the level of talent is very poor. And yet, in this town alone, this small town alone, I found 4 first-class broadcasters who did not stay very long in the industry because A, we couldn't pay them the proper rate, and B, because the future looked very insecure, and like everybody, they wanted to make sure that their future was secure, that they weren't looking at a disaster down the road for either they or their children. All sorts of talent is lost. And if we don't have a root and branch review of the system, and from people outside the system, there's no sense in handing it over to another civil servant. They only do things in their own image. And that is not good enough. It is not good enough. And the reason basically is because the structure of our society is so threadbare, is so open to criticism, is they don't want somebody coming in and saying, listen, this is not fit for purpose. The Sir Humphreys of Yes Minister still rule, and they are not funny anymore, because when it comes down to war, we don't know what to do. Our leaders do not know what to do. Oh, it's easy to say sanctions. What does that mean? Yeah, sure. Putin is having nightmares over sanctions. Yes, they may hit further down the road. But if you think about it, just very simple economics is that means the bigger his empire, the more countries and land he grabs back for the Russian Federation and recreates the old Soviet empire, the more resources he'll have to actually continue on his merry way. Sanctions. These things haven't been thought out because nobody really believed that it was going to happen. Well, I believed it could happen, and I've been saying so. Anybody who wants to go back over YouTube or whatever and look at some of my rants, they call me Mr. Keith. Okay, it sounds as if I'm a boaster, I'm a loudmouth, that I rant and I rave just for the fun of it. Well, I don't. I rant and I rave because I care about our society. I care about our nation. I care about our way of life. When I say our way of life, yes, I'm bitterly criticizing it at the moment. But I'm talking about freedom of thought and expression. Freedom not to worry about going to bed at night and being hauled out by police in the middle of the night. Those sort of things are of great value, and we should defend them to the death. But we really don't think that's going to happen, so we don't bother. And in not bothering, then the rest of society starts to fall down. The Metropolitan Police, a disgrace, and have been for 5, 6, even 10 years, destroyed lives and grinned at doing it, and then continued to do it. Is more corrupt than some of the countries that we've gone to try and stem corruption. The NHS, a disaster. The banking sector, it doesn't even recognize that people are its customers. It has got so up the backsides of computers. I can go on and on and on. Leadership is lacking. Structure is lacking. But mostly the recognition that something needs to be done. That our society is not fit for purpose. And ever since we had anarchy under Theresa May for a while in the House of Commons, that was a good signal to say, let us get a look at what's happening right now. And in fact, I have to say, God bless him, the one person to say it was Boris. He said our system is not fit for purpose. We need root and branch reform from the very top, the House of Lords, right down to the parish councils. And he was so right. But then he had to worry about whether he had icing on his birthday cake during lockdown, or his Christmas cake, or whichever sort of cake it bloody well was. I am fed up of hearing about the cake. And now the enemy is at the gates. And it is at the gates. Make no mistake. If this man is successful in what he's doing at the moment, and it looks as if it is within the next few days he's going to be. And if he then decides to carry on with an expansionist policy because he's cock-a-hoop, and the Chinese decide that they will get going with them, and the North Koreans then see it as let's flood over the DMZ, demilitarized zone, the border between North and South. The whole world could be in absolute chaos. And then somebody somewhere is going to push the button, and there will be a nuclear conflagration. And that could be the first sign that the world really is going to come to an end. I'm glad I'm old. I'm glad I'm old enough. Even if I have another 10 years, it won't be too bad. But for those youngsters who are just going into, say, secondary school, 10 or 11 or 12, what sort of world are they looking at? If they're looking at a world at all. Yes, I'm a doomsayer. Knock it off, Keith. No, I'm not going to knock it off. People have been telling me, shut up. Everything in the garden is rosy. Well, I haven't shut up, but I've been a pariah. Nobody really, they don't mind sitting over a dinner table or at a coffee shop and laughing and joking and saying, There, your lip was loose this morning, Keith. But now, isn't that funny? That lip, along with that of Stuart Dolby, in this part of the world anyway, who has forecast what's happened and is now happening in the energy sector, and is going to happen even more, that Ukraine has been invaded, that Russia is on the march. Yeah, I think that some people who know us, and a lot of people who don't, whose only weapon is to put a curl in the top of their lip, and which a Russian oligarch does not recognize. If that's our only weapon, God help us. God help us. So there you are. Who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Putin? He's not kidding anybody. He knows what he's doing, and he believes he can get away with it, and so far he has. And in this modern world, if he keeps up, he's going to be more and more successful. The Star shows a picture of Mr. Putin looking like Adolf Hitler. Well, we are faced with the same situation as the late 1930s. And we haven't reacted in the same way. We are so soft and sassy. We are not prepared to put up with pain. And yet it's going to be forced on us because we are losing, or we are imposing the import of energy just to show the man who has the tanks, we mean business. I don't know. Well, if we last the weekend, I'll see you on Monday. Until then, this is Keith Hayes, the mouth that roars, the lip, yap, yap, yap. But somebody's got to do the yapping. Somebody's got to be prepared to have cabbages thrown at him in the street because of what he's saying, because it needs to be said. And there aren't too many people with the courage, and I'm not suggesting I've got courage, there are not too many people who are prepared to do it. Till the weekend, diddle pip. Yes, there we go.